What's going on, Shady people? ShadyPenguinn here, and I'm very excited to bring to you this brand new series, VGC with Pros. As you guys can see on the screen, we're joined with a very special guest. But before we introduce him, if you're pumped, please be sure to show some Shady love to that thumbs up down below. This is going to be a new wave of just VGC, I feel like, on the internet. So I'm hoping that this can broaden your horizons. Maybe you'll learn a lot more from this series than you would from any other series, because we're joined, as you guys can see, next to me we have Cybertron. He's gonna go ahead and introduce himself and talk about what makes you a pro. Cybertron, tell us what makes you a professional Pokemon player.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Shady. Sup guys, my name's Aaron Zhang. I also go by Cybertron. I actually run a YouTube channel, Cybertron Productions, where I post VGC videos on a daily basis. So check that out if that sounds like anything that's interesting to you at all. But yeah, basically to summarize, I've been playing VGC officially since the first year that the Pokemon Company actually started holding these tournaments. So that's already 7 years, all the way back to 2008. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a really fun hobby of mine. I've really enjoyed it. I guess notable tournament finishes, winning back-to-back senior national championships in America in 2011 and 2012. I finished third at the 2013 World Championships in the Masters division, won 3 separate regional championships, the most recent one being Philadelphia this past fall, and qualified for 6 World Championships basically in the years I've been playing, and I will be competing at Worlds this year as well.
Wow. So as you guys can see, he can back up his claims, and like he said in the beginning of his introduction, like, if I want to watch like VGC battles and really get into the mind of someone, I go to his channel. Like he posts, he has his own form for to rank. No, I really, like, that's when I was telling him before we started recording, like when I was really into VGC and I got to like top 15 on the battlespot ladder or whatever, like when I was actually, and I had like 800 points, I was only able to do that because I was watching his channel. And I wanted to try to emulate that here, but I don't have the expertise, which is why I'm so grateful that you're coming on and that we're going to have other pros come on, hopefully, to just experience VGC. So today, as the first part of the series, how it's going to break down, if you guys didn't catch the update video last week, we are going to be spending episode 1 building a team in front of you guys. You guys can see that we have Pokemon Showdown here. We're also going to be peeking up some damage calcs, most likely. Whatever Aaron basically tells me to pull up, I'm going to be pulling up. But I went to Aaron and said, hey, can we build a team and use it on BattleSpot, and you can show us how pros play? And he said, absolutely. Just give me an idea. So I said, you know, I tried Trick Room once by myself and I was absolutely terrible with it. So let's see if you can make a Trick Room team that'll work. So I have no idea what he has planned for us yet. So just basically tell me and I'll start pulling it up on the screen.
Yeah, sure. So Trick Room, first of all, is a very, very good strategy in VGC. I think a lot of the times people underrate it. Every year when the rules switch, people are always like, oh, I don't know if Trick Room can still be as viable, but it always makes a really strong run. I actually used Trick Room at both the 2013 and 2014 World Championships, wow. So it's one of the favorite strategies of mine. I think when you look at it in this year's VGC format, I think the first thing you should probably consider is what Mega Evolution you want to use. Yeah. So the 3 most popular Mega Evolutions I'd say with Trick Room are, for example, like Mega Mawile, Mega Gardevoir, and then the last one is kind of a toss-up. It really depends on the kind of team. So hardcore Trick Room teams like to rely on Pokemon like Mawile and Gardevoir a bit more. And then the hybrid Trick Room teams, in which you have like 2 or 3 Pokemon that aren't really used in Trick Room, like to run Pokemon like Mega Salamence, which Colin Hyer, one of the best players in the world, just piloted to a regional championship.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, his team is something that I'd actually like to reference, in this video, because I think it's an example of a really solid Trick Room team. Okay. So yeah, he won, I believe it was Madison Regionals with it, and he used something like Cresselia Rhyperior, but he also had stuff like Sylveon and Mega Salamence.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and Mega Salamence is one of those really, really speedy Mega Evolutions. You don't expect to see it on a Trick Room team, but that's kind of why Trick Room is so good, because it can be built in so many different ways. You can have hardcore Trick Room teams, and I used one of them for fun earlier, where it was like Pokemon that were basically all meant to be in Trick Room, like Heatran, Sylveon, Mawile, Tyranitar, Hariyama, like all of this stuff that's really, really slow and kind of relies on Trick Room a bit more. But then you also have teams that don't need the Trick Room aspect at all, like Cresselia Rhyperior is actually often paired with Pokemon like Charizard Y and Venusaur, and that's like the sun aspect of it. Wow. So there's so many different ways you can run Trick Room, and a lot of the times, the first thing I consider is what I want to use as my Mega Evolution. Okay. So did you pick out a Mega? Really quick before we get into this, because this is something I want to do this series. You guys are seeing that we're focusing on Trick Room for this team and for this session. If there's a specific strategy that you want to see us focus on, or myself and another professional focus on, leave your suggestions down below in the comment section, because I want to bring the teams that you're interested in seeing. Do you want to see Tailwind? Do you want to see a different form of speed control? Do you want to see just like Aaron was saying, a weather team, sun, rain, whatever you want to see? Leave your suggestions and we'll go off that. But Mega, did you pick a Mega for us? Yeah, I actually really like Mega Gardevoir. It's actually a Mega I haven't used very much.
I was hoping you would say that, man. I was hoping you would say that. Because as soon as you said Gardevoir in, can I not pick, can I just pick VGC? I don't think it's there. It's all right, we'll just build it in OU. As soon as you said Gardevoir is popular in Trick Room, I was like, yes! So we're going to be building Mega Gardevoir. You know what? Hold on 1 second. All right, so I just had to do a little technical thing, but we are building around Mega Gardevoir. Now Aaron can actually see what we're doing. So what, I'm assuming Protect is on here?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Basically, every time you play VGC, every mon is going to have Protect. So Protect, Hyper Voice, and I'm going to let you go ahead and explain the rest of the moveset and why.
Yeah, so I think typically Psychic is a really popular one just because, you know, it's really powerful. You get stabbed. Most notably, it hits Pokemon like Amoonguss for super effective damage, and that's a pretty big one.
Yep.
And then the last one is kind of a toss-up. You know, if you're using Gardevoir as your Trick Room user, then obviously Trick Room.
Yep. Otherwise,
Hidden Power Ground to hit Heatrans, but I think Trick Room might be the way to go since we're trying to build this whole Trick Room team.
Okay, so Mega Gardevoir is actually the Trick Room user. I actually didn't. I'm excited. I didn't expect that. I just didn't understand. Okay, so we got two offensive moves, Protect along with Trick Room. So EV spread on this. Did you figure something out yet, or?
No, it's just personally because I haven't used Mega Gardevoir very much. I think if there's something we want to EV for, it's probably attacks from Kangaskhan, though. One thing to note about, for example, Pokemon under Trick Room, especially Mega Evolutions, like when I used Mega Mawai on VGC 2014, I actually literally just used max HP, max attack, and like 4 special defense. And I think one thing that a lot of players, especially beginning players or VGC, say to themselves, they're like, oh, I need this overly complicated EV spread to survive every attack. But like the reality is sometimes like simple spreads are the way to go. And when I build the team, actually, a lot of the times in the beginning, I go with a simpler spread. Like, it's more of finding the strategy, finding the core, finding the right Pokemon in the movesets. And then when I go onto battlespot and I start testing, then that's when, you know, I realize, oh, this Pokemon is really, really big. I should probably EV it to survive a specific attack from that. Or, oh, I need more speed investment to beat X, Y, and Z. But, you know, a lot of the times I like to just give it the simplest EV spreads possible, then relook at the team after the entire team's complete, and then edit it accordingly.
Okay, so I'm assuming then that means it will have max special attack.
Yeah.
And then would you do max HP?
Yeah, for now we can just put max HP, and of course we'll probably revisit a lot of the Pokemon as we build the team, but you know, that's what I like to do just to get a picture of where we're going.
Okay, I like that. You know what we can do actually too with this series, perhaps once we build this team and we're testing, like Aaron said, he normally jumps to battlespot and tests the team. If we keep simpler EV spreads for some of the mons or all of the mons, we'll revisit them at the end of the series and say this is what we think, what we experienced during these 6 battles, and what we're going to plan for in the future, and that's how we'll change the spread. So I like that. That's really cool. Okay, so this will be our star Pokemon. You would say the team: Mega Gardevoir, holding Trick Room, Protect, Hyper Voice, Psychic, max special attack, max HP.
Yep.
Okay, so what, I mean, you mentioned, would you want a second Trick Room user on the team? I'm assuming you would?
Yeah, it's a pretty good question. So, you know, there are a couple of popular Mega Gardevoir teams that I can think of that have, you know, recently done really well. And the reason why, you know, Mega Gardevoir is so interesting is because I think over here in America and even in Europe, it's not very popular, but it has a lot of usage over in Japan, actually. Ray Rizzo, you know, 3-time world champion, he built a team a while ago, and it was actually around Mega Gardevoir.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so, you know, it's definitely a Pokemon that I think a lot of people have realized has a lot of potential, but at the same time, hasn't been used very much just because I don't think many players have, like, found really the correct way, I'd say, to build around it. But, you know, for reference, a couple of popular ways that, you know, I'm just going to list off like 2 or 3 teams that Mega Gardevoir has done really well in. I think it's often paired with Pokemon like Heatran, Landorus Therian, Thundurus Incarnate, Amoonguss, Scrafty, Tyranitar. Seniors World Champion Nikolai Zelensky actually used the Mega Gardevoir team at a regional championship. He finished in the top 8, I think. He had Gardevoir, Heatran, Scrafty, Thundurus, Amoonguss, and Jellicent. So, you know, you see the 2 Trick Room users in there. So, like, Jellicent's one of my favorite Trick Room users. Cresselia is also often probably the most popular user for Trick Room in VGC 2015, just because it's so bulky and it gets such a nice moveset. So, you know, I'd probably consider Cresselia or Jellicent if I were to put a second Trick Room user on the team.
Okay, I think I'd like to go with Jellicent, if that's okay. Oh, and one other question I had that I just realized. Would you make Gardevoir negative speed nature?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Right? I realized that after I did it and we clicked away, I was like, it should just be negative speed nature to make sure it doesn't get outsped. I mean, make sure that it's slower than other Gardevoirs under Trick Room.
Yeah. So that's That's actually so one of the reasons why Mega Gardevoir is also interesting is because it's actually it can be played in like a hybrid kind of team mode. Like earlier on battlespot today, actually I played against someone who had Tailwind Talonflame, and his team looked kind of hybrid because he had like Gardevoir, Amoonguss, stuff like that, but then he also had a Talonflame, Landorus, Thundurus. So you know, that's another cool thing with Mega Gardevoir. It's one of the megas that can operate both under Trick Room and outside of Trick Room.
I like that.
You know, for our purposes, I think it makes sense for it. We should go more towards the Trick Room kind of variant rather than like a hybrid version. But so I do like the min speed here on this Mega Gardevoir. But you know, just for anyone who's wondering about Mega Gardevoir, that's why it's also a Pokemon that has a lot of different potentials on different teams.
Okay, yeah, I like that. That's awesome. All right, so we're gonna go Jellicent. Standard item on Jellicent. Would you just go leftovers or?
I think Citrus Berry or Mental Orb, just to guarantee Trick Room. Though I like Citrus a bit more. You know, Mental Orb is like for those really hardcore Trick Room teams that have no other way to play around it.
I got you.
And with 2 Trick Room users, I think Let Citrus Berry might be the call here.
Okay, and basically, Mental Herb is what prevents. What is it? Prevents like taunts and
taunts. Yeah, that's the main thing. So you know, a lot of teams or Trick Room teams that rely heavily on Trick Room like to have that mentor because Thundurus, especially with taunt, is one of the more common Pokemon in the format.
Yeah.
And for teams that rely so heavily on Trick Room and don't have a Pokemon like Scrafty or Amoonguss for fake out / redirection, it gets a bit dicey. So I do like Jellicent a lot. I think it's a really bulky Pokemon, heavily underrated. You know, one player that I can think of immediately has used it to great success is Zach Drakamp, who piloted it at the St. Louis Regionals, and in that tournament he showed that there are a lot of teams that just can't deal with Jellicent accordingly because it's so bulky and it has this means of recovery.
Wow. Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna see. Would you go Curse? Like, I was actually playing Battlespot the other day, and I went up against Curse Body Jellicent. Is that the standard, or is it preference?
That's a good question. It's mainly preference, but I like Cursed Body a bit more. You know, it's just like many people aren't going to be using water type attacks against Jellicent. Yeah. It's not like Surf Spam is that common. There are a few Pokemon that really will be using water type attacks in general against, you know, just Jellicent, obviously. They're not going to take that risk. And of course, it could be a bit scary if, you know, they figure out like, oh, you're Cursed Body, because then they can scald you or to try to burn you or whatever. But in general, I think Cursed Body allows for a lot of interesting positions. You know, having played against it actually, like at the World Championships in the past, like it can actually really screw your opponent up. And even though obviously it's RNG based, it's still like your opponent, there's a good chance that it activates at one point at any game, and that just makes it that much harder for your opponent to win the game, because a lot of the times it's disabling attacks that are really good against Jellicent. And Jellicent's one of those Pokemon where only a few attacks can really heavily damage it, so if you get the Cursed Body against it, then you can completely shut it down.
Awesome, makes a lot of sense. Plus, I mean, it's the chance of it happening is a Scald Burn chance, and Scald Burns happen all the time.
All the time.
They're really 100% chance. So we're gonna go ahead and assume the Cursed Body is also in that faction of 100% chance of happening. So you'll see it once a game if Jellicent's getting hit physically. So we're gonna go. I'm assuming Protect is also on here. He's gonna be a Trick Room user. That's our back. Is Jellicent is our backup Trick Room user. Yep. So, and then do you end up just going Scald Shadow Ball for dual stab?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because if we're trying to, we could run, so I'm like referring to Zach's Jellicent. His had like Scald for cover, Will-O-Wisp, and Taunt. His was like really bulky.
Will-O-Wisp, okay. Yeah,
so Will-O-Wisp is obviously a fantastic move, and it's just so hard to shut down. And so the way I'm thinking about it is like the way we can go about this team, you know, Mega Gardevoir is like the more offensive Trick Room user, and then we can have this bulkier Jellicent, which like kind of sits around, just sets up Trick Room repeatedly, maybe heals back, gets Will-O-Wisps off, and recovers. And it's interesting because Zach's Jellicent actually did not have Protect at all.
I was just about to say, I think if we do that, I don't think there's room for Protect.
Yeah. So like something I was considering is maybe something like Scald, Recover, Will-O-Wisp, and Trick Room. That's a moves that you could use. You know, Ice Beam is obviously a fantastic move on Jellicent as well, but we have Hyper Voice on Gardevoir, which obviously knocks out those Dragon types, which a lot of times you use Ice Beam for. And Hyper Voice is basically damaging anything like Ice Beam really would be too.
That's true. You know, I was having a discussion with my friend about just about Scald and VGC. Like, Scald is such a good move because it has 30% chance to burn. We already said, or 100% chance to burn. Okay, we already said. And but besides Pokemon, we were trying to figure out the Pokemon that Scald like really like besides the burn, like just as far as water stab goes. Like you have Terrakion, and you have what else? There's one other mon I think we ended up figuring out, like Landers, but you could use Ice Beam for that. Like we were focusing on Greninja, and I was saying how I think Scald on Greninja is pretty much useless in my opinion, because there's not too many things that really I don't think get. I'd almost rather always run Rock, like a physical Greninja, because I was running Protect, Ice Beam, Gunk Shot, and Scald. It was suggested by a shady person, and just throughout the battles, I was like, all the time, I was like, man, I really wish I had Rock Slide. I really wish I had Rock Slide. Or like, it was just the idea that I didn't see Scald having so much use besides the hoping for a burn.
Right.
But obviously, in this case, Jellicent doesn't have Protean, doesn't change typing, so having the Stab Scald on there is obviously fantastic. But it was just something interesting we were talking about.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really, really good point. I like that a lot because I personally actually think physical Greninja is the way to go at this point in the format. I think that Scald is one of the attacks where it's really good on typically the bulkier water types. You know, I loved it on Ludicolo, also when I used it in 2014, because as opposed to something like Hydro Pump, because, you know, the 100% accuracy goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely.
Pokemon's all about a game of information management and like trying to control the luck and RNG. And obviously RNG is a big part of it, but I think one thing that a lot of top VGC players will be able to tell you is those small different move changes and like Pokemon choices can go a long way in making sure that the RNG rolls in your favor. So like, one reason to use Scald over Hydro Pump is just because, first of all, the 100% accuracy is so big. You know, burning is a huge win condition, even though we have Will-O-Wisp on this one. Just the consistent damage output on a bulkier Pokemon makes it really difficult to take down. And, you know, it's always good when you can use an attack and know it will hit, unless, of course, they have, like, Bright Powder. But as opposed to something like Hydro Pump, which literally only hits, you know, 80% of the time, and missing 1 out of every 5 times is pretty scary, especially when you're on, like, Battle Spot, where it's not, like, best of 3 play.
Yeah, I personally, for me, I don't think I've ever chosen power over accuracy. I've always chosen accuracy over power. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe there's some points where I should be running Fire Blast instead of Flamethrower. But I know with my luck that I'm missing that Fire Blast anyway. I might as well, in my mind, I might as well leave that 4th move blank.
Right.
Because it's just like you said, you want to try to curve the luck as much as you can into your favor. You don't want to rely on, me personally, I don't want to rely on an 80% accuracy move because it's too scary. So this moveset looks good. Trick Room, Recover, Will-O-Wisp, Scald. Obviously, Scald and Will-O-Wisp. Will-O-Wisp is the guaranteed burn. Scald is that consistent damage output for the bulkier mon. So I'm assuming we're going to go max HP. And then it's interesting because with Will-O-Wisp, it makes me think, oh, well, normally on my physical walls, like if I'm thinking singles, physical walls, I run Will-O-Wisp on it and I make them physically bulky because, you know, that means they're going to take even less damage. But are you more fearful of like Thunderbolts and Giga Drains? Like for the Jellicent, would you rather be specially bulky or?
Yeah, I think for Jellicent, you know, just referring to other Jellicents I've seen used in VGC, and I think that's one thing that I'm going to be doing a lot throughout the series is referring to other players and what they've used in the past. I think at least this is how I personally go about building teams. You know, it's like observing what's done well, and it's done well for a reason, right? So like you look at the player's mentality and why it worked and what they did, and maybe, you know, you use that for inspiration or you do something completely different. But like when I look at Jellicents that have done well in VGC historically, like it typically is like a split between special defense and defense when it comes to bulk. So like I think it makes sense to invest more in special defense but still have some in defense, you know, because you still want that bulk.
So we'll because it's just a basic spread, if we're gonna go more special defensive, I'd say we could start with 104. Well, actually, let me bring it down. This is something, especially in VGC, something you want to do is you want to go to level 50 and make sure you're not wasting any. Make sure you're EVing accordingly. Like right now, 104 and 100 leave you with the same EV spread. I leave you with the same result of 103 in defense. So I wouldn't want to put. There's no reason to even put 104. So we'll see if that makes a difference. That makes a difference.
Sweet.
So that looks good for right now. And you'd want it to be more specially defensive. So would you want to go with a positive special defense nature?
I think nature? Yeah, Sassy might make sense here.
Sassy. Oh yeah, of course, because we're going negative speed. It's Trick Room.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that's our Jellicent. Those two look really good together. We have both of our Trick Room users. Now, we have an offensive mon, we have a bulky mon. What would be the next area that you'd want to focus on? Would it be more support? Would it be more offense?
So typically when I build teams in general in VGC, I always look to cover the weaknesses of the previous Pokemon I have on the team. So for example, you know, a lot of the times, if you already have 2 Pokemon and you can notice some common weaknesses, the 3rd Pokemon, at least for me, will be something that can fill in the gaps for those 2 Pokemon that are, you know, there.
Yes.
So, like, when I look at Jellicent and I look at Gardevoir, you know, thinking of some things that stick out as huge offensive threats in general, maybe like Amoonguss is really difficult if it could get spores off. I think Aegislash is probably one of the biggest ones because right now we don't have a way to effectively knock that out or KO it.
Yep.
So, you know, Heatran seems like the obvious pick here just because it's worked very well on other Gardevoir, or just other Trick Room teams. Colin Hire, as I mentioned, his Trick Room team also had a Heatran on it. I think Heatran just pairs really nicely in general on Trick Room teams because it's relatively slow, very, very bulky, and huge offensively. So I think having a fire type is also pretty important in VGC. If not, you know, every team should have at least one fire type attack just because fire is a very, very good offensive type in VGC given how many steel types are around. So, you know, I would personally recommend probably Heatran maybe for our next Pokemon.
Okay, so we'll go with Heatran. It's true because I was looking at, I was just thinking to myself, like, oh, you know, Bisharp would be really good because it resists the ghost weakness that we have, but that's just doing single typings. You can see the way that Aaron was thinking. He wasn't thinking just about typings. He's thinking about what mons shut them down. So like, it's not just that, oh, you're weak to ghost types. Let's go ahead and find something that's resist ghost types or whatever it ends up being. Even Amoonguss. Oh, Bisharp works well against Amoonguss too. But the idea of, okay, well, what are the common actual threats? Aegis slash Amoonguss. You had mentioned Amoonguss, so Heatran makes perfect sense, definitely. So Heatran, do you go air balloon or do you go leftovers? What do you personally?
So the most common items on Heatran in VGC are typically, if you want the offensive Heatran in Trick Room, you can go like Life Orb. If you want the bulkier variant, you can go leftovers. And then one that's actually really popular, especially on Trick Room now, is safety goggles, specifically to just shut down that Amoonguss completely.
Wow.
So, you know, players might not know, but safety goggles, you know, gives you the immunity to basically anything Amoonguss can do. If they rage powder you, your earth powers are still going to connect against opposing Pokemon that aren't Amoonguss, and they can't spore you, which is the biggest thing. So you can switch safely into spores from Amoonguss. They can't do anything, then you can Heat Wave or Overheat or whatever to knock it out. So safety goggles makes a lot of sense, and I know it's one item that a lot of players like using specifically on these Trick Room teams.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if we didn't give Heatran safety goggles, I'd want something to have safety goggles because it just makes sense. And then, I mean, I assume that you mostly run Flash Fire because of the commonality of seeing other Heatrans, and it shuts, like, you'll win that well, unless they have Earth Power on them, then I guess it doesn't matter. But I assume Flash Fire is the ability. Unless do you end up I don't think I've ever seen anyone run Flame Body. I don't think you can run Flame Body.
Yeah, it's basically only Flash Fire, I believe, because of the hidden ability.
Yeah, because hidden ability. As I was saying that, I'm like, wait a minute, you can't because there's no hidden ability for Heatran. Okay, so Protect. Heat Wave. No, wait, is it Heat Wave? Yeah, it is. Okay, Heat Wave, Earth Power. Now, if this is Trick Room, I was using when I was streaming with Wolf, we had a Heatran and we had Substitute on it. Does that belong on this team at all? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, if anything, right now, the team is probably a bit more defensive than most Trick Room teams, which is perfectly fine. But one thing you should know about Trick Room teams, especially in VGC, is you want to take advantage of the Trick Room turns, right? So, that's why a lot of the teams that are Trick Room, they rely on these really, really heavy hitters that, like, take advantage of it fully. As opposed to, so that's why, you know, you'd use full offensive attacks like Flash Cannon. I know a lot of players like as that fourth move on Heatran to hit Sylveons and Fairy types in general, which would make sense here. And so by using Substitute, you know, it's a fantastic move, gives you a lot of momentum. And it makes sense on Heatran because, you know, you can imagine setting up a Substitute on your last turn of Trick Room, and then even after Trick Room expires, you still have that sub to protect you. So I think it's perfectly viable to use either Substitute, or in my opinion, I'd probably use Flash Cannon for that last move, just because both of them work pretty well. Yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense to explain. Like, you don't want to. It's almost not that it's a setback because you do gain advantage if you set up that sub on the last turn, but then even not so because you're moving faster under Trick Room, and then your opponent is most likely going to outspeed you the following turn. So I agree where it makes more sense. Like, I can outspeed the Sylveon now and I can smack it with a Flash Cannon.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense. So like you said, simple EV spreads. I'm assuming we'll go max HP, max special attack with a quiet nature. I think looks good because I mean, because that's the other thing I was going to say. Substitute, I really probably would only prefer in Heatran if he was holding leftovers. Yeah. Because then it makes a lot more sense. It doesn't make too much sense in my mind to run safety goggles and Substitute, because Substitute really will go ahead and avoid the Spore anyway. Right. So, but with this, I mean, we're going to end up using this Heatran as more of an offensive presence, I guess. Even though it does have obviously the natural bulk, but the max special attack, if you look at that stat, that's actually really nice. I guess we'll put the extra 4. We could just put the extra 4 in defense. I don't think it matters too much. Yeah. Sure. It actually, yeah, it'll make it there. 252 in there. Okay, that makes a difference. Okay, so we have Gardevoir, Jellicent, Heatran. As you guys can see, building a VGC team in a professional manner is much more in depth. Maybe he could, I'm sure Aaron could build this team a lot faster if he wasn't explaining everything and just going through his own thoughts and not talking to an idiot who doesn't know much about VGC. But I really appreciate this. So, okay, we have Mega Gardevoir, Jellicent, Heatran, something that pairs well with those.
Yeah, I think the first thing that jumps out to my mind is now, okay, you know, we have all these Pokemon, but how do we actually successfully set up Trick Room? Because right now we don't have redirection or fake out or anything like that.
Yep.
And then another thing that jumps out to me is, oh, wow, we're pretty weak to Earthquake in general. I think ground immunity and Earthquake especially is, you know, such a common move, especially on Lander ST. So
yeah.
I think for any VGC team, if you look at all the popular teams that have done well successfully, they're almost always, like, I can pretty much guarantee that every successful team has at least one ground immunity, if not two, maybe sometimes even three.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, Lander's T typically fills that role, and it does work well in Trick Room. We could consider it. At the same time, you know, other ways, I'm just trying to think right now. A lot of the times, like, I like fake out users on my Trick Room team.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe we should try to find a fake out user. To use.
So I'm trying to think. I mean, like, fake out users that are common on Trick Room, Scrafty is one. Hariyama is actually my personal favorite that I brought to Worlds last year, just because it's really, really bulky. But Scrafty helps out a lot in this format with the Intimidate as well.
Okay, so we can go Scrafty. I mean, we learned with Wolf on our stream that Scrafty's the best Pokemon in the game. So just because we have to, we're gonna go Beltless, just because that's gonna. And we're not gonna see the nickname of Battlespot, but it's Beltless the Scrafty. I promised him that I would name all my Scrafties Beltless from now on. With the obviously it's gonna have the Intimidate ability, like you said. That's huge in VGC. Item wise, I guess I keep reaching to find out which Pokemon's gonna hold that leftovers, and I'm just not sure who it is.
Well, Scrafty is a Pokemon that actually likes Assault Vest a lot of the time.
Oh, of course, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Because then it has the Intimidate to make sure that it's covering the physical defense, like it's lowering your opponent's physical attacks, and then has Assault Vest just to kind of pair up. So obviously no Protect because just Assault Vest. Let's not make that mistake. Fake Out, Knockoff, I'm assuming is pretty standard. Drain Punch as well because the Assault Vest it has that recovery. Last move, is there suggestions?
Yeah, so the last move on Scrafty is pretty interesting because you have a bunch of options. Ice Punch is one, Snarl's one. Wolf actually used Snarl Scrafty at 2014 Worlds, which is really interesting because it can, you know, shut down Pokemon. And then Super Fang's actually a really cool one as well that a lot of the Scrafty Gardevoir teams have been using.
Wow, Super Fang?
Yeah, just because, like, think about it, Scrafty is typically one of those bulkier Pokemon, you know, it doesn't do too much damage because it's not like it has the highest of stats, but then Super Fang instantly chips you down to 50%, enough for a Gardevoir Hyper Voice or maybe a Heatran Heat Wave to, you know,
that's absolutely beautiful. I don't even want to question anything else. I think I was like, oh, Ice Punch makes sense. We don't have an ice move coverage yet. We can find that later on because no one else is going to use Super Fang the way Scrafty can. So that's really awesome.
Right, and it's so bulky too, so, you know, like, if you get two Super Fangs off, there's 50% off two Pokemon instantly, which is really
insane.
Good.
All right, so we're obviously going to go max, I assume max HP. And then we have the Assault Vest. So typically in VGC, how do you end up working out the rest of this spread?
Yeah, I mean, for something like this, like I said, a lot of the times I'll just go max attack for now, and maybe I'll look at some damage calculations later. And, you know, this may seem kind of like a rudimentary way to build teams, but the reason why I keep it as simple as possible is because, personally, in my opinion, there's no need to make this overly complicated EV spread where you're trying to EV specific attacks from certain Pokemon until, like, you really get into battling and you realize what role each Pokemon has on its team. So a lot of the times, you know, I'll look at maybe other EV spreads players have posted for reference, maybe borrow one of those and then edit accordingly, or I'll just go as simple as possible and then go from there. And then maybe sometimes I'll EV to survive specific attacks when, you know, that's the role of the Pokemon. But so far, none of these Pokemon are, like, there to, like, beat a specific Pokemon. It's not like we need it to beat one X, Y, and Z. So that's why I like to keep it simple. But, you know, I should point out that obviously these spreads aren't the optimal spreads for a lot of these Pokemon, you know, and as we play out throughout the week, there's a very good chance, you know, I'll tell you, oh, maybe we should edit accordingly, give it more bulk, take less out of attack. But for me on Trick Room especially, I like actually just going with as much offense as possible, and typically max HP works out, and it's like, you know, I've used Trick Room teams in the past, and just like looking at Trick Room teams I've used in the past, like Heatran and Conkeldurr back in VGC 2013, it was basically max attacks, max HP, maybe a little bit defense, and then last year, Mega Mawile, max attacks. So it's like you want your attackers to be as offensive as possible.
Definitely. Okay, awesome. So I agree with that, especially I keep forgetting that obviously we're going Trick Room and you want to take advantage of those turns that you have once you set up the Trick Room. Right. Because ideally you don't want to have to set up Trick Room again. In more competitive games, I'm sure you got to set it up twice in order to get it off because your opponent will protect, stall, and switch accordingly. But this looks good. I like that. I like Beltless right there rocking out. So whenever I see, it's crazy that Scrafty's so good in VGC just because it has that 4x weakness to Fairy, and Gardevoir and Sylveon are so common that like it just boggles me that he still ends up performing well almost like, just all the time. So he's definitely an awesome Mon.
Yeah, as I'm sure Wolf mentioned to you, like Wolf was telling me how like he's top cut basically every tournament in the past 4 years, like he's playing.
Yeah, with
Scrafty. Yeah.
Yeah, he said in the stream, he's just like, I pick Scrafty and I pick mons that'll work well. Like, I just pick 5 mons and I throw Scrafty on there. It doesn't matter. Like I know that there's a better mon for the team, but I gotta bring Scrafty, and it works out for him, which is really, really cool.
Right.
So with that, we don't really. The only other weakness we pick up obviously is that fairy type. Flying type moves aren't that common, I don't think, except for
other
Mega
than
Salamence.
like Talonflame and Salamence. Yeah,
Talonflame,
those are the
exactly.
two big ones.
Talonflame and Mega Salamence.
But Talonflame, not the biggest of threats right now. We've got Intimidate, which actually already shuts it down already, and then Jellicent goes a long way. Heatran, Talonflame can't touch it all either. So
exactly.
I'm not worried too much about it.
Okay, so what are you thinking for the next mon on this team?
Yeah, so this is slowly resembling all the other common Mega Gardevoir teams out there, but I think there's a reason why those teams are common. It's because that kind of core works really well. So, Amoonguss is always a pretty easy call when you look at Trick Room teams, just because it's Amoonguss, and redirection is so good. You actually get to redirect those super effective attacks away from Mega Gardevoir. So imagine like steel type attacks like flash cannons and stuff like that. And so Amoonguss typically is a pretty common partner with this kind of Trick Room hybrid team.
Okay, well we'll bring it on the team then. We were using on Saturday. I was using a team that was suggested by Shady Person, and it actually had Clefairy as the redirector. It was really cool. I don't know if it fits well on this team, but it was really cool to see Clefairy because it had pretty good bulk with Eviolite.
Right.
It had helping hand. It has basically everything that Clefable has, but it also has Friend Guard.
Friend Guard, that's right.
Yeah, which is really cool. So. I just something whenever I hear redirection, redirection, there's only so many mons that can redirect.
Yeah.
So being that it's such an important part of VGC, you're gonna see those mons over and over again. That's why, I talked to you about it before. I always like to look at VGC as like a game of chess. You get certain pieces, and even if you see those pieces all the time, whoever uses them better wins.
Right.
Like for the most part, obviously Scald burns, whatever, luck happens. But for the most part, it's who uses their team better, despite the fact that some teams may be common or some mons might be common. Who takes the time to prepare and actually work out the more precise EV spreads after the simplistic building. So I think that ends up being a lot.
Right.
So Amoonguss is going to obviously have Raise Powder Spore.
Yep. And then typically it's just Giga Drain and Protect.
Yeah.
Though it's actually interesting because people have been using like Sludge Bubble Amoonguss just to hit those fairy types a bit harder.
Yeah.
I personally like Giga Drain more. Like I don't like Sludge Bomb unless it's very specific towards the team, just because I think having a way to hit bulky waters like Rotom-Wash and Suicune and Jellicent is really important, since basically almost every other team in VGC has a bulky water type. So I like Giga Drain just because Amoonguss is there to annoy and then you just heal back.
Yeah, no, I agree with that definitely, because we don't have any grass type. We don't have any way to really hit a Rotom-Wash like you said, and we don't even have a way to hit a Suicune. Like we don't have any electric type attacks or anything like that yet. So Giga Drain definitely seems to be the best. And even with Amoonguss, but Amoonguss, see, now this is interesting because I know we were going simple EV spreads. Is this one of the mons where you do dump 252 in special attack, even though it's more of it's one of our bulky mons?
No, I think for Amoonguss, it just makes sense to go full bulk, because Amoonguss is one of those Pokemon you rely more on to set up Trick Room.
Definitely.
As you'll see here, Mega Gardevoir and Heatran, I'd say, are our two Pokemon that we're going to really be relying on when we play with this team to beat opponents. Everything else is there, can get damage off, it can annoy the opponent, but Gardevoir with its Hyper Voice, Heatran with its Heat Waves, really, really powerful. And maybe throughout the week we'll realize, because I think one thing I'm realizing as we build this team, a small issue we might run into is the idea that we don't get enough mileage out of setting up Trick Room and then getting damage off. I think one thing to note about the team building process in general is like it never really is completed. It's always like you're moving towards this common goal, this final end product, but like you have to practice, you have to play games really to know where to end up. And so that's why if a team that I start building doesn't fare well very much in practice, I'm not going to give up on it, because there are just a couple of things you need to adjust. And you'd be surprised how a couple of moves and a couple of EV adjustments and tweaks can completely turn a team around. So that's why I like to keep it simpler in the beginning and then figure out what the problems are and then edit accordingly maybe after a couple of games. So that's just how I personally go about building teams. Other top players like to just get it done right from the start and then make small adjustments, but for me personally, it's let me get the skeleton and then move from there. So back to the original point of Amoonguss, it's one that doesn't need special attack at all. Mainly it's a lot of the times that actually likes max HP, max defense, bold, just to beat the Kangaskhan, since Kangaskhan's so present. So you're able to completely shut them down. That's why Rocky Helmet's one of the most popular items on Amoonguss as well, so you get all that chip damage off.
Do you think, I was actually thinking that as you were talking about, first of all, really quick, that's extremely encouraging to me, and I hope to other players that are just either struggling in VGC or just wanting to get involved, that it doesn't have to be perfect right away. Like it's going to take testing. You don't have to. If you spend time building a team, there's ways. Obviously, you can reset your EVs and you can go in and you don't have to give up on that team you just made. Right. So I think that's super encouraging. I actually, the way you were talking, I was going to say, to you, maybe we should run Rocky Helmet instead of Black Sludge.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most common item, and I think it makes sense. I just love Rocky Helmet because it gives you so many different options. Like, if you're playing against a Kangaskhan and you have Amoonguss in the back, it's very easy for them to walk into the Rocky Helmet, and you instantly get that free damage off. I mean, 1/3 is nothing to scoff at because of Parental Bond, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's really, really good damage. You know, I love Rocky Helmet. It's one of my favorite items, and I used Rocky Helmet and Amoonguss at the most recent set of regionals, and it was really, really good. Despite it being around for so long, it's just, you know, it's always a very solid option, and it's one of my favorite redirection users. Probably the most common one, but it's common for a reason.
Awesome. Yeah, no, definitely. I think it is the most common one, but it like you said, it's for a reason. It's regenerator, it's spore, it's redirection. It's really, really good. And then being able to get those spores off under Trick Room is going to be so useful because obviously it's going to be the fastest thing on the field at that point, most likely.
Right.
So with that, we have one more slot left. You had mentioned that you're noticing a problem that we won't be able to, I'm assuming, like capitalize on Trick Room as much, like dish out as much damage as fast as possible. Is there any way that we can, is there a mon in particular you think will fill that role somehow? Or is it something we'll just have to like kind of hash out as we're battling?
Right. No, that's a good point. Right now, probably the thing that sticks out to me the most is the lack of ground immunity. So I think the last one will definitely want to be a flying type or a levitate user.
Yeah.
Just because that is a pretty huge weakness, just in general. And earlier you also mentioned a very good point. We don't have great ways to hit water types, especially bulky water types, other than like maybe the Amoonguss with Giga Drain. So, you know, Thunderous is a pretty common one. I actually kind of like Rotom-Wash for the last one here. Though it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's weird having Rotom-Wash and Jellicent, I guess, on the same team, so we can reconsider maybe the Jellicent's moveset. But one reason why I like Rotom-Wash so much is just because it's so bulky. Landorus T really can't do very much against it, and you can also get Will-O-Wisps off with it as well. But then we do have two Pokemon kind of in the same role, but I don't know. I definitely like Rotom-Wash, I think.
Okay, yeah, I think Rotom-Wash, because like you said, it has a levitate ability. It's bulky. It only has one weakness, which of course Heatran and Amoonguss both resist incredibly well. So we don't have to worry about that at all. And I don't think Grass, besides Amoonguss, I don't think Grass is, I mean, you'll see Mega Venusaurs, obviously, but I don't think Grass is a very common offensive type.
Yeah, not at all. You know, just popular Pokemon that would use grass types. Basically, Venusaur, which has not been too popular recently. And we have Gardevoir, which can beat that quite well as well. So, Gardevoir is a pretty nice check to that. Ferrothorn, but not too common. We also have Heatran specifically to beat that. And then you have maybe Ludicolo, but we have ways to take care of that. So, not really a big threat.
Okay, awesome. So we'll end up going Rotom-Wash. Now, is this the Pokemon with leftovers?
Yeah, I think this is finally time for leftovers.
I'm used to running Citrus on Rotom-Wash, but I mean, the Jellicent has Citrus, which is interesting. Right. So like you said, they kind of both have the same role. Right.
So it's like as we reconsider the team, maybe it would make sense just to have one of two, but I don't know. I do like having two Trick Room users in that. I think it's a pretty special thing. And I like that. This strikes me as a team where you're probably going to set a Trick Room more than once, but it won't be too difficult to, because you've got the Scrafty for Fake Out, you've got the Amoonguss for redirection, and then you've got Wait to recover and heal back, and like just Jellicent as its bulky role. You know, Rotom is more there to annoy for a bit, but then it'll faint. But then Jellicent's one of those Pokemon that literally can stick around for forever if you play with it correctly. So they're not the entirely the same Pokemon.
No, definitely. I think that'll be cool to see. I mean, you still have to run Will-O-Wisp on Rotom-Wash, even if you're running it on Jellicent. I feel like you have to.
Yeah.
And then it's probably just, I'm guessing, Dual Stab, Hydro Pump, and Thunderbolt.
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
That's how I'd go about it.
It's interesting that Rotom's so good because I mean, you look at its HP, it has base 50 HP, which of course isn't that much, but then you look at the defense, it's 107 defense on each side. Is ridiculous. With Amoonguss being bold, would you end up, I mean, would you put, I feel like when I use Rotom-Wash, I end up doing like half and half. Like it's not one way or the other. I don't know if that's what you do or what. I know obviously it's determined by the rest of your team, but what are you thinking for this spread?
Yeah. I mean, I typically go like max HP, a lot in special defense, maybe some special attack, not as much, and then some defense. So that's like typically what I do. I definitely go max HP though.
Yep.
I'm just trying. Yeah, and then
we can go. I mean, like you said, we're gonna play with this team. We're gonna tweak it out. If we notice, like, oh wait, we thought Rotom would live that physical hit, we'll put more in its physical defense, or vice versa, or anything. Let me just make sure this is actually making a difference. It's not. So it's just 52. See, that doesn't make a difference either. 6. 8 left. Wow. Okay, then we can go 48. Okay, so that's a pretty random spin. And then would you end up making him negative speed nature as well? Obviously, for under the Trick Room, make him sassy.
For Rotom, I typically like to keep it at calm, just because it's a Pokemon that can operate pretty well outside of Trick Room as well. And it's like we have other Pokemon that already have min speed, so it's one of those Pokemon where even if you don't get Trick Room up, at least it'll still be able to outspeed some common Pokemon.
Yeah, so it's a cool thing to note that you don't want to. I mean, not that I don't think it's really a hybrid team, unless I'm wrong, but you don't want to dump all of your eggs into your Trick Room basket.
Exactly.
Because then when that basket cracks, you're kind of up a creek, obviously.
Right.
Is there any last minute changes that you think as you're looking over the team that you want to do before we officially bring this to BattleSpot, or?
I think it's a good start. There's no doubt in my mind this is far from a completed team, and there's like definitely adjustments we can make, but I do like it a lot personally, just based off other Mega Gardevoir teams that I've seen worked. This kind of team heavily resembles the ones that it was really based off the other ones that I've looked at of the past, but there's a reason why. It's like those Trick Room teams have worked very well, but it's also a bit unique. I haven't seen anyone use the combination of like Rotom-Wash, Jellicent, and Mega Gardevoir, so I think that'll be a bit interesting as we play with it. If anything, some Pokemon we might want to consider as we go down that are really popular in Trick Room. Escavalier typically is a really popular call, Conkeldurr, but there's a reason why we don't have those, right? Because we've got Heatran for our bulky steel type, we've got Scrafty as a fake out user rather than Conkeldurr, which is used more for heavy offense, getting maybe Drain Punches, or my personal favorite set is actually revisiting 2013, which you use like Life Orb and Hammer Arm, which is really powerful. So those are things we might want to consider in the past as we continue to use this team. I think there's no doubt in my mind maybe one Pokemon feels a bit off, but you never know what that Pokemon is until you actually start practicing and testing around. But otherwise, it looks really solid. I'm just like looking at other Trick Room teams that have done well, and this team just makes a lot of sense to me, and I definitely feel like it can be successful.
All right, awesome. Well, with that, then we're going to wrap this first episode up. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. When we come back, we're going to be on BattleSpot together. For the first episode, most likely Cybertron's going to be calling the shots, and then the point of the series is to see if I can pick up the thought process of a professional player, and basically I'll say, hey, I want to do these 2 moves for this turn. He'll say, actually, those 2 moves are terrible. This is what we should do. And we'll all be able to learn along the way. So I think it'll be really cool. And of course, originally this was planned to where we would have 1 team building episode and then 3 episodes of battling. If we realize, and if you guys like it enough, that we can change enough of this team, maybe we'll bring him back and just work on this team for 1 more session before moving on to another team. So I'm really excited to do this. Thank you again so much for coming out. And of course, you're gonna be here for the next week or so, but it's awesome. I'm really pumped to use this team. But with that, we'll get out of here. Have yourselves a good day, but above all else, keep it shady.